Hey guys, my name is Steve and today we are going to take a look at another horrible case with you. We all have seen murder mysteries, but some stories hold the power to leave us traumatized. One of those stories is of the Lin family, in which all 5 members of the family were brutally murdered and no one remains alive in the whole family. Let's delve into the true crime story of the Lin family. On the 18th of July, 2009, 5 members of the Lin family were found brutally murdered in their home in Sydney's northern suburbs. A complicated and protracted investigation followed, leading to one of the longest single-defendant murder trials in NSAID's history. The case is unique in that while no identifying evidence was ever located, placing the offender at the crime scene, forensic evidence nevertheless formed a significant part of the case at trial. It seemed like a robbery case at the beginning, but what happened after months of investigation left everybody in shock. As life took a turn and everything turned into a bad, haunted dream for the Lin family, Min Lin and Yun Lily, Lin, both from China, came to Australia in search of a dream. Their love story unfolded in this new land, a classic tale of immigrants giving it their all for a brighter tomorrow, especially for their kids. They didn't just settle, they worked hard and turned their news agency in North Epping into a big hit, raking in about $1 million a year. The community loved them, they were like the local heroes. It seemed like a robbery case at the beginning, but what happened after months of investigation left everybody in shock. As life took a turn and everything turned into a bad, haunted dream for the Lin family. The Lin family wasn't just successful, they were close-knit. Lily's sister, Irene, was right there with them, living in the same house, helping out with the nieces and nephews. The trio of siblings, 15-year-old Brenda, 12-year-old Henry, and 9-year-old Terry. They all lived peacefully and happily under one roof. But who knew that their peace and successful life won't last long? All their hard work would go in vain, and they won't be able to live the life they always dreamt of. Who knew that they all would lose their lives? Around the end of 2007, Min Lin's younger sister, Kathy Lin Nai, and her husband, Liang Bin Robert Z, decided to make Australia their home. They were living a good life in China, but they wanted to excel in their respective careers and wanted to have a good and successful life as Kathy's other relatives, especially her brother Min Lin had. As Kathy's most relatives, including her brother Lin, were financially stable, Kathy and Robert, they were chasing better opportunities in the lively city of Sydney. This wasn't their first stint in Australia. They had visited relatives before and even briefly lived in Melbourne, and tried to settle many times, but every time they failed due to some reason or the other. But now it was the time when they left everything and gave away all their belongings just to settle in Sydney. However, this time, they were determined to stay for good. Robert, once a successful ear, nose, and throat doctor in China, decided to take a different path. He was admired by Min Lin and his success, and thought that he could also lead to success and have a good life by changing his work and his occupation. He ventured into entrepreneurship, opening a restaurant in Sydney. They put all their hopes and savings into it, but unfortunately, things didn't go as planned, and they had to close the restaurant. The closing of the restaurant caused them a lot of financial issues and caused them to suffer. Robert then tried opening a cafe, but it didn't work out as well. He was trying his best to do something in Australia to make his life better and support his family, but could not do so. Robert and Kathy invested all of their money and everything they had in an attempt to settle. But fate had some other plans. Robert faced challenges in his new endeavors. Those challenges got so tough that they lost everything they invested. Later, Robert tried to do something else and attempted entrepreneurship. He tried to do many things but couldn't make it. That was maybe because he was not consistent and lacked a working spirit. Facing the ups and downs, Robert and Kathy decided to move closer to family. As Kathy was going through such a hard time, Min Lin welcomed his sister in his house and tried to unite their families as he could not see his sister suffering. The Lin and Z families joined forces, making their bond even stronger, a daily part of each other's lives, sharing family dinners and staying in constant touch. They almost became a part of each other. They made such a strong and good bond as they were seeing each other almost daily. Little did they know that their last get-together was on the evening of Friday, July 17, 2009, at Kathy and Min's parents' house. It was a joyous occasion, but none of them had a clue that it would be their final reunion. It was a Saturday morning on July 18, 2009. On one of the busiest days, Min Lin's news agency was closed without any notice. That was rather unusual as the news agency had been operating daily. His customers were close to him, finding him as a daily fixture in their daily routine. English was not Min Lin's first language, but he was friendly with his customers. One of Min Lin's customers called his sister, Kathy, to ask why the news agency was closed. Kathy, too, felt something was off. Her 45-year-old brother never missed work. Worried, she and her husband rushed to Min Lin's home. The front door was wide open, which was obviously not a good sign. Kathy felt it pretty weird, as none of the family members ever did. Neither they were irresponsible to let the door open, but still she had no clue that something miserable would have happened. Kathy entered the house with her husband Robert, and what she saw in there shocked her. Inside the master room, they found a terrible scene. The room was drenched in blood, covering the floor, walls, ceiling, curtains, everything. It was very heartbreaking for Kathy to see her sister-in-law's body in such a state. Even though the face was all messed up, Kathy still knew it was her sister-in-law, Lily. By seeing Lily's body in such a condition, Kathy could not believe her eyes. Kathy quickly moved to the other room to see her nephews if they were okay. But when Kathy went in there, all she could see was blood. Kathy saw Henry and Terry's bodies as well that were brutally beaten to death. They had massive cuts and severe scars on their body, which indicated that the killer used some sharp tool to murder them. But still, Kathy thought that it was a robbery case, and the robber mistakenly and unconsciously murdered them. Their scars also indicated that they tried to stop the killer and save themselves but couldn't. The only one left untouched by this tragedy was Brenda Lin, away for a school thing. She had no clue of what happened to her family. Brenda was first unaware of this tragedy happening to her. After a few days, Brenda found out something about her family. She found out through friends on Facebook, thinking it was a cruel joke. It was not until she flew back and saw her Aunt Kathy in tears that the harsh reality sank in. The Lin family's world had turned upside down, and Brenda was returning to a home she never thought would change so drastically. Now back to the site of the incident. Kathy, after seeing her sister-in-law and her nephews in such horrific condition, all drenched in blood, covered with scars all over their body, was terrified and scared. She started to think about her brother but could not find him, which made her think that he could be the suspect. So, the first immediate suspect was Min Lin. He was the only one missing, and the theory was he had beaten his family to death and fled. It was Kathy who pointed out the possibility that Min Lin was under a doona. He was. He was beaten so badly that he was unrecognizable. The first thought was Min Lin was missing. The scary idea was that he had hurt his family and run away. But Kathy noticed something crucial. Min Lin might be under a doona, and there he was, beaten so badly that he was hard to recognize. But his sister Kathy recognized him by the watch in his hand. In the middle of feeling really scared and sad, Kathy dialed 00, the emergency number in Australia. Kathy was having a cathartic moment, and in this moment of panic and worry, she was trying to tell the police officer that someone killed her brother and his family. But the police officer could only hear Kathy sobbing and crying. He tried to ask her about her emergency, but it was hard for her to put into words what she was seeing because she was still trying to figure it out herself. In this moment of sadness and sorrow, Kathy could not understand what she should do. Suddenly, her husband Robert said that he had to go somewhere. She really wanted her husband, Robert, to stay with her, but he insisted on going to get Min Lin's parents. This was very unusual, that in this moment of sadness and misery, Robert kept insisting on leaving Kathy and getting Lin Min's parents, as he should have been with his wife instead of leaving her in that cathartic moment. When the paramedics arrived at the house, they uncovered a horrifying scene. The worst kind of murder anyone could imagine. Sadly, it was too late for the Lin family. They couldn't be saved. Each family member had been brutally murdered with multiple blows to the head, using a heavy, blunt object. The investigation revealed a chilling detail. The killer took the weapon with them, leaving no trace at the crime scene. Min Lin, the dad, was found in his bedroom covered in blood, just like the rest of his family. This wasn't a typical break-in gone wrong because nothing was missing from the house. The violence was so severe that, at first, the police thought they might have been shot from close range. But the post-mortem examination revealed an even more disturbing truth. The victims were beaten far more than necessary. It was as if the attacker went way beyond what was needed to end their lives. The level of brutality was heartbreaking and left everyone questioning the motive behind such a senseless and intense act of violence. After the terrible incident, Brenda Lin, the only one left, returned to Sydney from her trip to stay with her aunt and uncle. By the law, it was clear that Brenda would inherit all the Lin family's property. Her grandparents tried to look after her, but her uncle was not doing everything he could to keep her close, even from her own grandparents. Now, this was shocking for both Brenda and her grandparents that Robert was keeping Brenda away from them and was even trying to take over the Lin family's property. But these tricks of Robert didn't last long. As time went on, Brenda took charge of the Lin's shop and publishing store, which had been temporarily closed. Meanwhile, Robert, her uncle, became actively involved in checking bank accounts, real estate, and other assets. It was a challenging time for Brenda as she navigated through the legalities and responsibilities that came with inheriting her family's belongings. A month after the murder, the police came out with another possible theory on the Lin Fin trying to figure out the awful family murder. There was a thought that Min Lin might have been targeted because he saw a robbery just 2 months before near his news agency. But later, they decided this wasn't the case because the whole family was murdered and the killer knew that Brenda was not home, which is a sign that the murderer is someone who is maybe a part of the family or aware of the smallest details of the Lin family, as no outsider can possibly know this much detail about the family members, their presence in the house and their rooms. After further investigation, the police officers found something which was enough to tell that it was a one-man job, and this whole murder was pre-planned, and each and every murder was done deliberately, consciously, and knowingly. The officers found a shoe print. When they looked at the bloody shoe prints left behind, they figured out that the killer wore size 9.5 shoes. Investigators believed it was just one person behind the crime. This person had a hammer-like weapon with a string, and they used it to cause the most serious injuries to Min Lin and Lily, suffocating and beating them. The blood splatter showed that one of the boys tried to fight back, but it was really tough. Here's a puzzling detail. There were blood stains on the doorknobs of each bedroom, except Brenda's. This suggested that the killer knew Brenda was not at home. It added another layer of mystery to a very sad and confusing situation. They thought maybe it was a robbery gone wrong. But that idea got tossed out. The money and valuable stuff were left alone, and it seemed like the killer's main goal was to erase any trace of the whole family. Adding to the mystery, the power in the house was cut off that night. This suggested the killer had a plan and knew the place well. Maybe they even had a spare key to the house. It was like they had everything figured out, making it all the more puzzling. The killer's approach and the way he knew the rooms of the victims was a sign that he was aware of the house structure. One more thing was the fact that there was no blood on the doorknob of Brenda's room, which indicates that the murderer knew that Brenda was not at home. As investigators carefully listened to Kathy's emergency call multiple times, they stumbled upon something crucial. In the midst of Kathy sobbing and explaining the horrifying incident, there was a moment when she spoke to her husband in Cantonese. The officers thought this might be a valuable clue to crack the case. Upon translating her words, they discovered that Kathy was desperately asking her husband not to leave her alone in the house. This became a big deal because, in that moment of shock and sadness, Robert, instead of staying with his wife, decided to go and get the Lin parents on his own. This raised suspicions among the investigator. It seemed odd that he was not with Kathy during such a distressing time, making them wonder about his behavior and potential involvement in the tragic events. After digging into the case for months, the cops uncovered a surprising twist. It turns out that Robert had a spare key to Min Lin's house, a detail he conveniently left out during questioning. This raised a red flag, making him a suspect. What made it even more interesting was that Kathy, Min Lin's sister and Robert's wife, had no clue that her brother had given the key to her husband. Brenda, unknowingly, spilled the beans on this detail during the investigation. As they peeled back more layers, it was revealed that Robert was not the successful ear, nose, and throat doctor he claimed to be. Despite having a medical degree, he never had a steady job in that field. Rumors floated around that he came to Australia to escape bribery charges in China. His attempts at running a cafe business also failed. After settling in North Epping, he relied on his wife's salary and occasional financial help from Kathy's close relatives to get by. The investigation was uncovering more than just the tragedy at Min Lin's house. It was revealing a web of secrets surrounding Robert. Once the guardianship papers for Brenda were all sorted out, Robert's behavior took a strange turn. It was like he suddenly thought he owned everything that belonged to the Lin family. His first move was to push Min's parents out of the house that Min had bought for them. Even though Kathy and Min's parents stuck around in the house, Robert's actions made it clear he was not thrilled about Kathy's successful and well-settled relatives, especially Kathy's brother Min. Despite this, the police could not arrest Robert because they did not have enough evidence to do so. Robert was very clever. He did everything to not leave a single piece of evidence which could be the reason for his arrest. After this shoe incident, police asked Robert's wife Kathy to install secret cameras in their house, as they think Robert is suspicious, and he could be behind the murder of Kathy's brother Mi and his family. Kathy agreed to this, And this little step made a huge change in the case and turned the tables. It was like a puzzle missing some pieces, leaving them unable to take action against him. On May 7, 2010, something suspicious happened at Robert's place. A secret camera caught him cutting up a shoebox into pieces and flushing it down the drain. What made this action even stranger was that Kathy, his wife, was right there, watching it all unfold. Now, cutting up a shoebox might seem like an odd thing to do, but it turned out to be a critical piece of the puzzle. Here's the real kicker. The shoebox matched the unique shoe prints found in Lin's home. These weren't your everyday shoes. They matched a specific model, Asics Gel Elevation 2, and guess what? Robert was spotted wearing those exact shoes in a photo. Even more, his shoe size, 9.5, lined up with the estimated size of the murderer, which was between 8.5 to 10.5. It was like the missing link they needed to connect Robert to the crime. The pieces were starting to fall into place. In the camera footage, Robert was carefully destroying a pair of sneakers, and this became a crucial piece of evidence. This footage led to a search warrant for his house, where the police discovered another pair of sneakers matching the killer's size, 9.5. But that wasn't all. They also found a tiny smear of blood in his garage. Reports confirmed it had the DNA of all 5 members of the Lin family who were tragically murdered that night. Robert tried to cover it all up by saying that the blood smear was of that day when he and his wife Kathy came home from Min Lin's house right after the incident took place. This was the concrete evidence the police needed, and Robert was arrested. Fast forward 2 years to May 2011, and the evidence pointed directly to Robert Z's arrest. However, he kept denying everything. In the court, he started making stories and denied that he had nothing to do with the murder of Lin and his family. He even tried to explain away the blood stain in the garage, saying it happened after they returned home from the incident. It was a challenging time for everyone involved, as the truth slowly unraveled. While sitting in prison, awaiting trial for 3 long years, Robert unintentionally spilled the beans about his gruesome murder plan during a conversation. Shockingly, he revealed that he purchased a deadly weapon from a remote store with no surveillance cameras, making sure he left no trace. In a disturbing confession, he admitted to giving sedatives to his wife so she would not notice his actions on that dreadful night. After further investigation, it was found out that Robert used to sexually harass Brenda all the time she was living at their house after the death of his family. She further said that she tried to tell Kathy about this, but Robert threatened her that if she would tell Kathy about it or take any step against him, he would punish her or even kill her like he killed her parents. He used to threaten her that he would also kick her out of the house and she would be homeless, as she had no one except Robert and Kathy after her family died. This whole scenario made Brenda so sad and frightened that she never told anything to Kathy. But now, during the investigation, when she saw the tables turn, she told everything to the officer that happened to her and how Robert abused her, the way he affected her mental health and gave her traumas by harassing her and making her life difficult. But Brenda showed a lot of courage and bravery and stood against Robert's cruelty and his torture, and told the way he tortured her both physically and mentally, and left her with nothing. Robert, in the cell, talked to his cellmates about how he hid the evidence and got everything covered so the police would have no reason to arrest him. To cover his tracks, Robert got rid of the hammer, sneakers, gloves, and clothing in a way that made it nearly impossible for anyone to find them. He also told his cellmates that he didn't kill Brenda because he liked her since the beginning, and told them about how shamelessly he killed her family and left her with no option but to live with him and his wife Kathy and endure the abuse and suffer with the physical abuse he used to do to her. But when the trial finally came, he denied everything, but the only evidence against him was his own words, conversations where he openly confessed to his cellmates. Despite this, the jury could not agree on a unanimous verdict, leading to Robert being released on bail in December 2015. It was a jaw-dropping turn of events that left many questioning the justice system. While sitting in prison, awaiting trial for 3 long years, Robert unintentionally spilled the beans about his gruesome murder plan during a conversation. Shockingly, he revealed that he purchased a deadly weapon from a remote store with no surveillance cameras, making sure he left no trace. In a disturbing confession, he admitted to giving sedatives to his wife so she would not notice his actions on that dreadful night, in a way that made it nearly impossible for anyone to find them. When the trial finally came, he denied everything. But the only evidence against him was his own words, conversations where he openly confessed to his cellmates. Despite this, the jury could not agree on a unanimous verdict, leading to Robert being released on bail in December 2015. It was a jaw-dropping turn of events that left many questioning the justice system. Subscribe to my channel for more videos like this one.